Friends, welcome to my new Q&A series. In my encounters with subscribers and the people I talk to all over the world now, really, I'm often asked some really interesting questions about culture, leadership, even farming, and political life. So today, I'm going to go through some of the most frequently asked questions, the things that people put to me. If you'd like to propose a question, please post one in the comments section, and we'll see whether there's an appetite for exploring some of these issues. John, you've spoken about the need for courageous leadership in Australia. Many Australians care deeply about the direction of the country, but feel disillusioned or powerless and unable to make a difference. What advice would you give to everyday Australians who are looking for ways to get involved? Well, it's a good question. One of the podcasts I did was with Lord Jonathan Sumption, a former Supreme Court judge in the United Kingdom, very highly regarded man. And he actually said this is the age of disengagement. And he made the interesting comment that for decades after the Second World War, the two major political parties in Britain had a card-carrying membership of around 3 million between them, but today that's collapsed. People are disillusioned, they're cynical. It's not an age when people join things anyway, and the Royal Society of Birdwatchers in the UK probably has more members than the political parties combined. That may have changed a bit with Nigel Farage's activities, but it is a general principle. People are disengaged. I think the first thing I'd say is that if a democracy is going to work, people can't afford to be disengaged. We need them to be thinking carefully about how they'll vote. We need them to be thinking carefully about who they'll support, whether they might even run for office themselves, how they'll get behind good members, and how they will approach members that they disagree with and don't think are performing. It's a surprising thing to say because so few people do today, but I think people should join the political party of their choice. I think people should make an effort to get to know their local representatives, local, for that matter, state and federal. I think that people should think seriously about making appointments to meet with their federal members, for example, because that's what I was, and I came from a rural electorate. People assumed they could access me, and I tried to be accessible. It was very hard. My electorate was the size of England, literally. And then you have your other duties, especially when you're in government, over and above that. But I did try very hard to be accessible. The other things that you can do, I think, never underestimate the power of a thoughtful letter. No use just scribbling off a form letter or copying one. You've got to put thoughts together and demonstrate that it's really something you've thought about to the papers or on social media or indeed to your member himself or herself, whoever they may be. But to be engaged is very, very important indeed in a democracy. If a citizenship is disengaged, if it's cynical, if it doesn't pay attention to how it's governed, your freedoms gradually evaporate. So there's a lot at stake. I've been frequently asked recently what went wrong with the Liberal National Coalition at the last election. And many people say, can it be saved? Can it be resurrected? Well, the answer to the first part of the question, in my view, is that there was a perceived lack of sound policy and conviction. And I firmly believe that the Australian people were ready to make a change, but they saw no evidence that on the big issues confronting Australia, enough thought, enough preparation, with enough conviction was there to make them switch their vote. The polls were suggesting that they were willing to, that many Australians were looking for a different direction in government. It is, after all, a simple fact that we now have the most left-wing Prime Minister and probably government with it that Australia's ever had. And it must never be forgotten that 1 in 3 only, if you account for those who didn't vote, in fact, probably less than 1 in 3 Australian voters who were entitled to vote, have voted for the current team. Now, that is not to excuse my old team, the Coalition. It didn't put up the answers it needed. It didn't address what I would describe as the key issues, which are the defence and the security of the people in a very uncertain world. There's no use having social benefits if you don't have a country to deliver them in. And secondly, the running of a sound economy so that we can address the slide in living standards and we can stop robbing from our children, because that's divisive. Our children, if we don't get our defence right, and if we hand them a tax burden that is so serious they can't enjoy the opportunities that we had, and they can't get into a home because of poor economic management, they won't celebrate our generation the way we celebrate the generations who have gone before us, who have made great sacrifices, who've given us a country and a standard of living and freedoms that, whilst the country might not be perfect, are plainly amongst the very, very best in the world. We've lost our way and people are becoming cynical. And even I noticed on a comment the other day, I think it might have been a Canadian, who wrote in and said, I have lost a lot of respect for the Aussies in recent times. I pick that up quite a bit. As an Australian, it causes me great concern, because we've always been a mid-sized country that's been a great contributor, not a traveller, when it comes to trying to improve humanity's lot here and internationally. Now, can the coalition be saved? Of course it can. It requires firm leadership. It requires the willingness to stake out real ground, real policy ground, and go and argue it. It should never be forgotten that the polls were showing that the proposed voice to entrench a class of categorised people in the Constitution that was different to other Australians enjoyed tremendous support early on. After the arguments had been really mounted and people engaged in them, it completely flipped, and overwhelmingly Australians came to a different position. That's the power of leadership, of staking out your ground, of arguing it, of showing conviction, and above all, given that Australians are committed to fairness, I want to make this very powerful point. Australians will respond to powerful arguments for fairness. The reality is that whilst we, on the matter of the voice, all have concerns that Indigenous Australians do well, I certainly am very committed to that, the idea of entrenching categorisation in the Constitution when its very principle, underlining principle, is to ensure total equality before the law, no matter who you are, if you're an Australian citizen, was not seen as fair. Argue the case, present the policies, believe that you have a better direction for Australia, because that's what Australians are looking for. Now, in the series where I am reading out some of the questions that have been put to me, there's one that I don't even really like repeating, but it has been asked, and so I'll share it with you. Can you share some of the steps you took to ensure you stayed grounded and principled throughout your political career? Now, that's an awkward one, because the minute I imply that I think I stayed grounded or principled, I'm sounding proud. And C.S. Lewis warned that humility is the greatest of the virtues because it's the opposite of pride. Pride leads to every human failing. Every human problem finds its root in pride, unjustified pride, illegitimate pride, false pride, excessive pride. And so he said, pursue humility with all your right. The trouble with it is that the minute you think you're making progress, you know you're not. So I think the first thing I'd say is that I've always genuinely tried to keep in mind that I have little to be boastful of, that, as Churchill said of another member, the modest member has a great deal to be modest about. Secondly, I think my upbringing in country Australia with a gifted man, my father, who had a particular aversion to people being on themselves, people being above themselves, people sounding pompous. I think that helped. Having a wife who is totally unimpressed by anything that's not genuine and that is false has been a great blessing. For me personally, I have to say that right through my political career, we always worshipped in a Christian church on Sundays, and it's a useful thing. I think this is one of the great cultural losses as we've moved away from Christianity, to be reminded that you've done the wrong thing from time to time. You don't have a monopoly on right and wrong. Confession is actually very good for the soul, so to speak, to actually have to say, well, I was not fair to that person, or I've not loved the Almighty as I should, or I have not been entirely willing to pay my taxes or whatever it is. And that self-examination is, I think, the antidote to the sort of pride that identity politics is producing, where we say it's all about me and I will decide what is right and wrong. And very often in my life, I've realized that something that I thought was all right, when I've stopped to think about it, when I've heard the arguments, when I've been confronted by good thinking, by Christian thinking, teaching, whatever, the advice of friends, the arguments in the pub even, I've realized, in fact, I wasn't right. I've been wrong. And I think it's a tough part of the human journey to face the fact that you're not always right. But I think it's critically important. A good friend of mine said to me once, John, if you weren't suffering, it was when I was going through a period of intense criticism over something, he said, you'd be insufferable, which was a cutting remark at the time. It came from a good friend who I knew meant well, and he put it humorously, but he had a point. There's no doubt that if we floated right through life, if we really were able to think all the time that I'm in control of my own destiny and I'll manipulate everybody around me to suit my ends, the world would be even more troubled than it is. A question that I really am asked a great deal now, because people are very worried about Australia, is along the lines of what are the 2 or 3 most pressing issues facing the country and what should we try and do about it? Well, I would say that there are actually 3 major responsibilities for which we have a Commonwealth government, a federal government. The first, reflected very much in the thinking of the people who put it together for us, the giant men and women on whose shoulders we stand, was the safety of the Australian people. If you don't have a country, if you don't have a society that you're able to, if you like, shape and control and participate in freely, well, you're not able to enjoy all the other good things that a society like Australia should be able to deliver. So I think we face a very challenging international environment, and I really worry that we're not ready for it. Cyber warfare, we're almost in a cyber war now, and that is deeply troubling. And maybe Australia's not doing too badly, but it's very intense, and we need to realise how serious it is. We need to understand the bad motives that lie behind it, the lack of regard of our independence as a nation and as a people, the desire to rob by false means our technology and even our money and our wealth. Then there's supply chain security. As a farmer, I can't put it more bluntly than say that I'm staggered, absolutely dismayed and staggered that despite the talk about supply chain security, we haven't done it. So as a farmer, I have to tell you, we do not have the fertilizer and the fuel stockpiles we need if our shipping routes are interrupted. We wouldn't have to initiate a war or even say we were going to participate in a war for those sea lanes to be cut and for us to be in very real trouble in short term, a matter of weeks. And I can't understand why governments have not taken this seriously when they keep telling us that times are dangerous. And the third, quite simply, is defence. The argument we're having at the moment over we're spending 2.1% or whatever it is of GDP on defence is puerile and silly. It is ignoring the very strong advice of many, many people on all sides of politics and the experts in particular in the areas of defence. It doesn't cut it. And in reality, what we've tried to do is to pretend we can have nuclear-powered submarines, which are incredibly expensive, and pay for them out of the existing budget. And the result of that has been that we're not actually spending like we were around 2% on defence without submarines. We're spending about 1.3%. That's about the figure. So we've cut capability and personnel at a time that's very dangerous. America is stepping up again. Our European friends are stepping up again. Great Britain's stepping up again. I don't know what's the matter with us. I can't believe it. As a son of a serviceman who almost lost his life, securing freedom so that people like me could enjoy them in later decades, I don't get this. Add to that, then, the need to run an economy that is strong enough to pay for our defence and to enter and end the division that intergenerational theft represents. We are dividing as a nation. That's particularly the case as we see the importation of ancient hatreds from the Middle East. That's another subject. But the question of division, because justice and community harmony are great responsibilities of the federal government, are very important indeed as I see it. And a part and parcel of that is to run an economy so that we don't have to borrow money to ease the cost of living crisis at the expense of our children, born and unborn, because that is what we are doing at the moment. It's intergenerational theft on a grand scale. Our forebears rarely did that to us, and when we did, we didn't appreciate it. We shouldn't be doing it either. So, in a nutshell, security, ending the division and the divisiveness that living beyond your means will produce, and running a strong enough economy to resolve those first two problems, I see as very important. Another question that comes up quite often is that of whether or not the Liberal, and indeed I suppose some people would say the National Party, should move to gender quotas because we have what is called a woman problem. Now, I know this is a sensitive issue, but I want to say that I don't support gender quotas. I don't broadly support quotas at all. I don't believe that the coalition lost the last election because people were worried that we didn't have enough female candidates. There may have been some. But in reality, for a start, you might have a look at the fact that there were Liberal Party members who lost, women, who lost to Labor Party men. I think the electorate is sophisticated enough to know that it's about policy and what you're going to do. The polls show the coalition could have won as recently as February and March before the recent last election. It was lost because of a lack of policy and conviction. And Australians didn't feel the coalition was ready to govern. So I think it's about policy, policy, policy. Now, I'm all in favour of those women. And as a general principle, I think you'll find the research suggests that women are less interested in running for public office. Some people have a problem with that. I don't. I say differences are terrific. Why do we want to all be the same? Why should it be assumed that we will mandate something like quotas in any area rather than simply express freedom, encourage people to give it their best, to get behind good candidates for whatever position, not just political ones, the best person for the job? Why will we not simply recognise that there are some tasks that appeal more to men and some tasks that appeal more to women? I think that's real world thinking. And so as somebody who would be delighted to see another female Prime Minister in Australia, absolutely delighted, provided they were on top of the policy game and the things that needed to be done in Australia. And as somebody who thinks that women can and do absolutely pull their weight in our culture now, absolutely, I have to say that I'm all for encouragement. I'm all for looking for ways to encourage women to run. But essentially, I don't believe in quotas. I mean, where does it stop? Do you end up like some countries where there are quotas for almost every position, covering almost every aspect of human character and personality and difference, and it becomes a form of totalitarianism, and good and capable people very often can't get a position because quotas have gone too far? I know that's a far cry from simply having quotas for women in public life, but I think the principle of quotas is a bad one. I say encourage good people of capability everywhere, regardless of any of their personal characteristics other than integrity and suitability for the job and to lead, and get on with it. It's been put to me that it's becoming increasingly common for people to question multiculturalism. People say, Was adopting multiculturalism a bad idea in Australia? Do I agree? If multiculturalism means that we're going to argue that all cultures are equal, yes, it's been a bad idea. If it means we're going to enjoy people who have different perspectives on their customs, the way they eat, the way they dress, the way they express themselves and so forth, all of that's terrific. It's enriched Australian life wonderfully. But you do need a core set of values to take a country forward. Our culture was driven by the Judeo-Christian idea that every individual has worth and dignity, that every individual should have the right to vote, to freely remove people from power at the point of a pencil, and freely to elect people at the point of a pencil. Our culture insists that before the law, all are equal. Most obviously, men and women are equal before the law. But so too is somebody from, if you like, the back of Burke and the Prime Minister. All are accountable to the law, the common law. Not all cultures accept the virtue and the value of any of those ideas, or let alone all of them. So we need to be absolutely realistic. There are many people from other cultures who come here precisely looking for the things that our core culture has given us that they want to participate in. That's a good thing. But it was all brought home to me recently when a man who spends a lot of time in Vietnam told me that he had met a man who had come here looking for a better life for his children, and he sent his children to school so that they could understand the foundations of the culture that he was so much enjoying being a part of. And this father commented that his children were coming home full of ideas about why Australia was not a good culture and why, in fact, it was a dark place with a dark history that had nothing to celebrate. No one pretends we've got everything right. But by gee, if you stop and think about it in a hard-nosed and realistic way, we've got a lot right. We have a great deal to celebrate, and we ought not to fall into either of the two great progressive mistakes. One is that all cultures are equal and compatible. I don't believe they are. And the second is that all wisdom resides in the present. There's a lot of chronological snobbery around when we refuse to believe that those who have gone before us actually, like us, struggled with the great questions of right and wrong, struggled with the great questions of how to build a free and fair society. When we will not learn from them, we make a grave mistake. When we criticize them from a position of moral superiority, imagined rather than real, as is so common today when we pass judgment on those who have gone before us, we actually demean ourselves. We're not understanding that, in fact, there are many cultures where you'd have far more reason to regret the actions of those who have gone before you than there are in Australia. There's another set of questions that are put to me that sort of run along the lines of, well, John Howard and others have kowtowed to America in the past, but now Anthony Albanese is kowtowing to China. Do we have to kowtow to anyone, to one superpower or another, to China or the US? And if so, which one should it be? I think it's a great shame we think in these terms. I don't claim that Australia is a big country, but we are a significant country. We're a country that has been a great force for good in the world. We've argued for freedom. We've fought for freedom. We've defended ourselves and our allies against such evils as Nazism and indeed Japanese aggression during the Second World War. These are things that we can, I think, be legitimately proud of. And as a significant country, indeed, with just 27 million, we still have around the 12th largest economy in the world. I don't believe we have to kowtow to anyone, but it is very important for us to carefully ally ourselves with those who share our democratic values, who share our commitment to the vote, to democracy, to free enterprise, and to the freedom of all, not just those with power. And the simple reality at the moment is this is not a question at all about whether we align most with the American people or with the Chinese people. It's a question of aligning ourselves with democracy and freedom, not with the Communist Party that reigns in Beijing at the moment. I think that's a very important distinction to make. And those who doubt what I have to say on this might like to go and read up carefully on what has happened in Hong Kong. The Hong Kongese, of course, are Chinese by ethnicity. They built a vibrant and exciting and interesting democracy, a place that people wanted to go and see. They were brave in defending it, but not able to withstand the might of Beijing and its communist dictators when it came to maintaining their own freedom. We need to make those distinctions. It's a system that we're against. It's a system of freedom and democracy that we ought to be prepared to ally ourselves with. We're looking for like-minded people who believe that government should be downstream of culture, not upstream of culture. That's what democracy is. If we use it properly, through our vote, through having our say, through free speech, through freedom of assembly, through even freedom of property rights, we are able to take our culture where we, the people, want it to go, rather than have it dictated to us from on high. These things are important to think about. And just as our forebears have taken a stand on these things in the past, so should we. A question that I've been asked for many years now, including back in the days when I was in the Parliament, relates to the fact that as a Christian, I should respond to the claim that faith should remain separate from politics. It's an important point. It's actually a Christian concept that government should be secular. The biblical idea that you should render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and to God that which is God establishes that they're separate realms and that, in fact, one is lesser than the other. And I think that's actually important because I actually think when you remove God from being over government and over us and having some authority and setting some moral standards and insisting that we care for one another and so forth, government becomes God. And I don't think human governments are very good at playing God. Having said that, though, I'm not arguing for a moment that our democracy should be swamped by the church or should listen to the church. Apart from anything else, the church often has different perspectives on things anyway. Sometimes some churches, in my view, are just plain wrong. But I think our forebears always assumed that people who were informed by their worldview, and in the time that Australia was established, they would have been mainly Christian, would participate in the politics of the day. Now, by worldview, I mean that everyone has a way of seeing the world. Every cabinet minister has a way of seeing the world because they have a worldview. If they haven't, if they haven't even thought about it, and I do meet those people sometimes, they've not thought about how they see the world. But a cabinet minister, you have to assume, will have one. It will be a set of beliefs. And democracy means that all of those beliefs, if you like, should be able to be freely expressed. And so I would say I'm all for the separation of church and state, but I'm all for people who are informed by faith should be able to fully commit and take part in the democratic machinery of our country. And indeed, I remember once a fellow cabinet minister challenging me and one or two others, and probably three or four of us really, to leave our Christian beliefs at the door when we walk into the cabinet room. And I remember wondering which particular part of my Christian beliefs I should leave behind. Was it the bit that said I actually have to be committed to my neighbour? Whether I like them or not's irrelevant. I have to do my best for my enemy as well as my friend. The bit that says that personal probity is incredibly important. The bit that says that caring for the poor and the marginalised is important. The bit that says standing for justice and the security of the people. I see all of those as deriving from a Christian worldview. And they're not the sort of things that should be left behind at the cabinet door at all. The cabinet can only benefit from having those perspectives being put forward, in my view. What should Australia's education system prioritise to equip young people with the knowledge and character needed to address our nation's challenges? Well, as somebody with an interest in history who thinks it's important, I think that we should be giving all of our children a genuinely robust education in civics. And civics will involve a deep understanding of democracy. And a deep understanding of democracy will understand some basic thinking from our forebears. How did they so painstakingly, often at such terrible cost, establish the things that we now take for granted? The four broad freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of conscience and belief and religion, freedom to own and to trade property, including your intellectual property, so that you can earn a living. How did they come to the balanced view that on the one hand, we have worth and dignity, so should have a say in our future, and that's what the vote's about. But on the other hand, we're fallible, so the people we vote in might become proud or lazy or backward in their thinking. So how do we peacefully remove them? This sort of thinking goes to the wisdom of the ages, the great struggle to balance what Blaise Pascal, the famous French philosopher, thinker, commentator, wrote of when he said that human beings are the glory and the scum of the universe. So to fail to give our young people something of an understanding of the thinking and the price that people paid in ages long ago to give us the freedoms, the values, the institutions that we have, our parliaments, our courts, our schools, our police forces, and so forth, is to shortchange them and to leave them ill-equipped to take a country forward. There's a very valuable subset of this that Churchill used to talk about. It's very important not just to teach your children, he said, if a society is to flourish, the things that it believed in, its religion, if you like, but it's also important to teach them about the heroes that have gone before them. If you teach well the story of heroes, you'll recognize that there's no such thing as a perfect hero apart from Christ himself. There are only people of clay, but people who have displayed rare courage, that have been people of great character, of great persistence, of great intelligence. We can learn a huge amount from them. We can also understand that we aren't the first to rail against injustice and to want to create a better world. It's been really interesting for me to, as I've gone through life, to understand the incredible price that some people have paid so that we could live freely. I think of the greatest human rights of all times, which, to my way of thinking, was the freeing of the slaves by the British, which was at the time the global superpower. And they did so voluntarily through the democratic processes. They gave up the dreadful evil of capturing or purchasing captured slaves in Africa and transporting them across the world and trading and profiting out of a human misery that was unforgivable. And we need to understand the price that people paid to end that trade. How do I think that Australia should position itself geopolitically to maintain its values and influence in an increasingly complex global landscape, especially with rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific? Well, I think that Australia is in danger of losing all confidence in itself. We're only a youngish country, although we're quite an old democracy. We should still be young and vibrant and confident and forward-looking. We should still believe that we can be a force for good in the world, that as a mid-sized power, with, I would hope, the capability to mean that our word means something, that we look like we actually do have conviction and we would use the materials at our hands if we needed to in defence of freedom. No, that's what we did in the First World War. It's why we celebrate Anzac Day. It's what we did in the Second World War. The first victory against the forces of evil in the Second World War was the Australian 9th Division in the Middle East. They played a disproportionate part. The British commander who won that first significant turnaround victory commented 25 years later that he didn't think he could have done it without the Australians. We have punched above our weight for good in the past. We can do it again in the future, but at the moment, we're declining in economic capability, we're declining in conviction, we're declining in military capability. Not that we would ever seek to be an aggressor power or a major power, but you've got to look like you actually believe in yourselves and you will defend your values, and you've got to seek out allies and work with them, and you need to be courageous enough to call out bad behaviour when you see it. That's been the mark of the Australian people. I profoundly believe we've been a nation of character, a nation of characters as well, and we've always been prepared to, if you like, stand up for the little guy, and that means standing up for democratic values and for freedom and for free enterprise. If I had the chance to start my political career over again, what would I do differently? Well, I think I'd know then what I know now. This is one of the frustrating things in life. You go on learning unless you're really so totally self-absorbed that you think you know everything. I plainly know a great deal more now than I might have when I entered the Parliament at the age of 31. I hope I was willing to learn then, but there's no doubt that I should probably have more intentionally sought out people who could fast track me in wisdom and understanding in relation to public policy. There's no doubt I could have read more widely. There's no doubt that I could have engaged myself more in some of the things that I think I probably didn't pay enough attention to. Nonetheless, I don't for a moment regret the marvellous opportunity that I had. I'm thankful to the party that gave me that opportunity. I'm thankful to the people in it who backed me. And I'm thankful to my family for standing with me. The only great thing that I would claim was that I genuinely did it because I wanted to serve and because I believe in Australia. Whatever other faults I might have, I was overwhelmingly and remain motivated by a sincere love of my fellow Australians and my desire to see they and our children together prosper in safety.